The knock on Daniel Foster's door came at exactly 7:30 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday evening. He wasn't expecting anyone, especially not someone who would change his life forever. When he opened the door, there stood Eliza Blackwood, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her confidence radiating like heat. "Hello, Daniel," she said calmly, though her eyes betrayed a storm of emotions. "I've come to claim what I owed 20 years ago." Daniel felt his world shift beneath his feet as he recognized the woman he once knew, now one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, standing on his weathered welcome mat while his 2 children did homework just feet away. What happened next would redefine everything he thought he knew about sacrifice, forgiveness, and second chances. If you're already captivated by Daniel and Eliza's story, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more emotional journeys that remind us how interconnected our lives truly are. Now, let's dive deeper into this remarkable tale that spans 2 decades of secrets, regrets, and ultimately, redemption. 20 years earlier, Daniel Foster and Eliza Chen were inseparable. College sweethearts with big dreams, they had planned their futures together with the certainty of youth. Daniel was studying education, passionate about becoming a teacher who could change lives. Eliza was pursuing business with a scholarship that barely covered her expenses. They supported each other through late-night study sessions, minimum-wage jobs, and the struggle of being first-generation college students. Their senior year brought unexpected news: Eliza was pregnant. The timing couldn't have been worse. She had just been offered a prestigious internship across the country that could launch her career. Daniel, ever supportive, insisted they could make it work. They would raise their child together while pursuing their dreams. But Eliza's parents had different ideas. They threatened to cut her off completely if she didn't terminate the pregnancy or, at minimum, give the baby up for adoption. They reminded her of her responsibilities to her family back home who had sacrificed everything for her education. One night, after hours of tears and impossible choices, Eliza made a decision that would haunt her for decades. She left a note for Daniel explaining that she couldn't be a mother yet, couldn't sacrifice her future, and that adoption was the best option. By morning, she had disappeared from campus without a trace, leaving Daniel devastated and alone. What Daniel didn't know, what Eliza never told him, was that she hadn't gone through with the adoption. At the last moment, she couldn't bear to part with their child. Instead, she left the baby with Daniel's sister Maggie, with a letter explaining everything and $10,000 she had borrowed, all she could scrape together. She made Maggie promise never to tell Daniel it was from her. The story Maggie crafted was that she'd found the baby through proper adoption channels, and Daniel never questioned it. Daniel abandoned his teaching plans to help his sister raise the child he believed was his niece, Sophie. Years passed, and tragedy struck again when Maggie was killed in a car accident. Daniel, who had always been like a father to Sophie, officially adopted her. He never married, dedicating himself instead to raising Sophie and later adopting another child, a boy named Liam, who had been in foster care. Meanwhile, across the country, Eliza had transformed herself. She changed her last name to Blackwood after marrying briefly in her 20s. Her career skyrocketed as she channeled all her energy and ambition into becoming someone powerful enough that no one could ever force her hand again. She became known as the Iron Empress of the business world, building a tech empire from scratch. Few knew of her humble beginnings or the sacrifice that had driven her relentless climb. For 20 years, she kept track of Daniel and Sophie from a distance, making anonymous donations to Sophie's school, setting up a secret trust fund that would become available when Sophie turned 21. She watched Daniel struggle as a single father, taking whatever teaching jobs he could while raising 2 children alone. She saw how he never seemed to find time for his own dreams. Now, standing in Daniel's modest living room, Eliza felt the weight of 2 decades of choices. Sophie would turn 21 in just 3 months. Eliza had achieved everything she had ever wanted professionally, but the emptiness had become unbearable. She had come to make things right before Sophie received the trust fund and inevitably discovered the truth. "What exactly do you think I owe you?" Daniel asked, his voice tight with confusion as he studied the face that had once been so familiar, now transformed by success and time. Nothing, Eliza said quietly. It's what I owe you. And Sophie. Daniel's face paled. How do you know my daughter's name? The conversation that followed unraveled 20 years of secrets. Daniel's anger exploded like a dam breaking, anger at the deception, at being denied the knowledge that Sophie was biologically his daughter, at the years of struggle while Eliza built her empire. He demanded that she leave, that she never contact them again. Dad? Who is this? Sophie appeared in the doorway, her features a perfect blend of both her parents. At 20, she was brilliant, kind, and fiercely protective of her father and brother. The resemblance to Eliza was unmistakable now that they stood in the same room. That night changed everything for the fragile family. The truth came out in painful waves. Sophie's anger matched her father's, anger at being abandoned, at the deception. Liam, now 15, watched his family imploding with the quiet vigilance of a child who had already experienced too much loss. Eliza didn't defend herself. She simply told the truth, laying bare her fears, her youth, her impossible choice. She explained the trust fund, the anonymous support over the years. She told them about her own childhood of poverty, about her parents' manipulation, about her terror of failing everyone who depended on her. I didn't come here expecting forgiveness, Eliza said finally. I came because you deserve the truth before Sophie finds out another way. And I came to offer what I can now, though I know it's 20 years too late. The days that followed were tense. Daniel refused to accept anything from Eliza, though Sophie, after her initial shock and anger, became curious about the woman who had given her life. Against her father's wishes, she agreed to meet Eliza for coffee. Their first real conversation was awkward, painful, and revelatory. Sophie learned about her biological mother's rise from poverty, her business acumen, her loneliness despite her success. Eliza discovered that her daughter had inherited her analytical mind but Daniel's compassionate heart. Why now? Sophie asked. Why not 5 years ago? Or 10? Eliza's carefully constructed facade cracked. Because I was diagnosed with cancer last year, she admitted. It's treatable, but it made me realize I couldn't die with this secret. I couldn't leave without at least trying to make amends. This revelation shifted everything again. When Daniel learned of Eliza's illness, something in him softened despite his determination to remain angry. He remembered the young woman he had loved, brilliant, determined, and always carrying the weight of her family's expectations. Gradually, tentatively, they began to build a new relationship, not picking up where they had left off, but creating something different. Daniel agreed to let Eliza help with Sophie's college expenses, something he had been struggling with. Eliza, in turn, learned from Daniel about parenting, about the daily sacrifices and profound joys she had missed. As months passed, Eliza underwent treatment, facing her mortality with the same determination she had applied to her business. Daniel found himself driving her to chemotherapy appointments, sitting beside her hospital bed, remembering how it felt to care deeply for someone beyond his children. Sophie watched her parents' cautious reconnection with a mixture of hope and fear. Liam, always observant, was the first to truly accept Eliza, asking her questions about her business, showing her his science projects, giving her the chance that others were more hesitant to offer. The true turning point came a year after Eliza's first appearance on their doorstep. Her cancer was in remission, but the experience had transformed her. She had stepped back from daily operations at her company, reconsidering what truly mattered. Daniel had witnessed her vulnerability, her regret, her courage in facing both her health crisis and the consequences of her past decisions. One evening, as they sat on Daniel's porch watching Sophie and Liam laughing in the yard, Eliza turned to Daniel. I never stopped loving you, she confessed. I just didn't know how to be the person you deserved. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. The people we were 20 years ago don't exist anymore, he finally said. But perhaps the people we are now might have a chance, if we're brave enough to take it. Their journey wasn't easy. There were setbacks, arguments, painful reminders of the past. Sophie struggled with dividing her loyalty between the father who had raised her and the mother who had returned. Liam worried about where he would fit in this new family configuration. But slowly, something beautiful emerged from the wreckage of the past. Daniel finally returned to school to complete his education degree with Eliza's encouragement. Eliza relocated her company's headquarters to be closer to the family, creating a non-profit arm that focused on supporting single parents pursuing education. 2 years after that rainy Tuesday when Eliza appeared on their doorstep, they gathered in the same living room, now in a larger house with room for everyone, to celebrate Sophie's college graduation. As Sophie looked around at her unlikely family, she raised her glass. To second chances, she said, and to the debts we owe each other, not of money or obligation, but of truth, forgiveness, and love. Daniel reached for Eliza's hand as they toasted their daughter. The journey had been painful, complicated, and far from perfect. But the family they had created, born of mistakes, redeemed by courage, strengthened by forgiveness, was more precious than any success or achievement. As for Eliza, she had finally claimed what she was owed after 20 years, not a debt from others, but the chance to reclaim her own humanity, to repair what she had broken, and to discover that true success had nothing to do with corporate empires and everything to do with the courage to face one's deepest regrets. In the end, what Daniel and Eliza both learned was that sometimes our greatest mistakes can lead to our most meaningful redemptions. That families aren't always created in conventional ways. That 20 years might seem like too long to repair what's broken, but it's never too late to try. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us all that second chances are possible, that redemption is within reach, and that the families we create, through blood or choice, through mistakes or intentions, are the true measure of our lives.